If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Granquist.
Here.
Arns.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
McCarthy.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Clausen. Hildebrand.
Here.
Okay, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Then look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
All right, that takes us to item number 21 on your council agenda. Your special presentations. We'll have a check presentation from the Lower Elkhorn Natural Resources District for the 7th Street Beautification Project. It looks like we have the NRD Chairman of the Board, Mark Hall, and Nate Powell, our Parks and Recreation Director.
Mayor Mummy, City Council members, my name is Mark Hall. I'm currently the chairman of the Lower Elkhorn Natural Resource District. And I'm here to present the city for the 7th Street Beautification Project, a check that you guys, the city submitted as part of a cost share program. So I'd like to congratulate the city, appreciate your participation in events. Although our budget is not large, we do try and focus on things that we have a vested interest in our mission. So we do support a 15 county-wide area that we're responsible for a variety of projects such as flood reduction, very prominent here recently. And we'll continue tree planting, this is part of one of the projects, decommissioning wells that are no longer in use, soil conservation, which is one of the primary missions, water quality, which we're getting a lot of information out, recreation facilities and wildlife habitat. On behalf of the Lower Elkhorn NRD and board and staff, we'll be happy to cooperate with the city on this valuable forestry incentive project. I present you with a check in the amount of $3,163.69 for the 7th Street Beautification Project.
Very good. Thank you, Mark, for being here tonight, and thank you for the partnership involved on this project and other recent projects that Lower Elkhorn NRD has assisted the city on, including recent projects like River Point Square and the North Fork Restoration Project. So we very much value the opportunity to work with our local natural resources district. Thank you once again. All right, that takes us to the public hearings and related action portion of the council agenda. Item number 22. We'll open this public hearing for the Board of Equalization to hear and equalize special assessments for Water Extension District number 127. And to do so, I will start by looking for a motion to adjourn as the mayor and council and convene as the Board of Equalization.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Okay, as the Board of Equalization, we will kick off the discussion for this public hearing and hear for some background on that from Steve Ramus, our Public Works Director.
Mayor and Council, before you is the assessment for Water Extension District number 127 on Channel Road. This was a water extension district that was specifically requested by a landowner in that that is included in the district. After receiving that, we did visit with the other landowners in there, explain the request. The water quality in that area is poor, and so there was a desire to get on city water as a function of increasing water quality, as some of the wellheads were starting to seize in terms of production. We moved this forward. As a function of moving this forward, there were subcommittee meetings held on March 8th and March 25th where this was discussed. Several years ago, or a few years ago, we had another extension district there just to the south of this. They were those. Well, I'll come back to that. This district then included 7 parcels and 5 property owners. The district the construction has been completed at a total cost of $213,730.31. The abutting property non-assessable is $71,157.19, and so that portion of the project is paid by our water fund. The abutting property assessable costs are $142,573.12, and so that would be the portion then that is assessed back to those 7 adjacent parcels. At the subcommittee, the committee members expressed a desire to reduce that assessment to the property owners via an agreement by 50%. So the assessed value would be 50% of what the numbers are here. And then with that agreement, should those parcels ever be re-subdivided, that additional 50% would become due at lump sum. There is, in terms of benefit to these properties, as I mentioned, water quality is a substantial benefit to the Water Extension District. The city does test for over 90 different chemicals in the water to ensure that the water is safe to drink. Having the city water system there and the supply also improves the fire flow into that area for fire protection, which has the potential to lower homeowner insurance premiums if those are in place. It also is documented that for some loans, specifically FHA loans, a lot of times they look to see and provide an enhanced rate should those properties be on city water and city sewer systems. Likewise, as mentioned, for future development, having access to city and water and city sewer does enhance the ability to develop those properties, as well as improves the marketability of those properties. So with that, I guess I would open it up for any questions you might have. I would also note that regarding the agreement with the property owners, the 5 property owners, 3 of the owners have signed the agreement to defer 50% of the assessment until the property is future subdivided or subdivided in the future. We have 2 other property owners. We have been having conversation with them, and I think they're meeting with Dennis Watts tomorrow morning for signatures.
Thank you, Steve. Any
And
questions?
then those agreements would be brought forward at the next meeting.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. Okay. Seeing and hearing no one, we'll move to close the hearing, and to do so, I would look for a motion to adjourn as the Board of Equalization and reconvene as Mayor and Council.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Unless no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Takes us to item 23. I would then look for a motion to consider approval of ordinance number 5808, levying special assessments in Water Extension District number 127.
Make a motion for ordinance number 5808.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Council?
That was a motion to approve, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Short title, please.
An ordinance levying special assessments upon the lots, parts of lots, lands, and real estate abutting upon and adjacent to, and specially benefited by the improvements in Water Extension District number 127 of the city of Norfolk, Nebraska, to defray the cost of said improvements and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5808 carries on first reading.
Mayor, if I may, just for clarification, that is a 20-year assessment. If those, once billed, if those assessments are paid within 50 days, there is a reduction of that, I think it's a 1.11% reduction in principal paid within the first 50 days.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. Are we on any kind of timeline here that would require suggestion to suspend the rules and approve on second, third readings?
Yes, interest has been calculated to a date specific, so if we can pass on all three readings, that's ideal for us.
Even though the other people haven't signed?
Those would come in a separate.
Yeah, the agreements are a separate piece. Mhm.
If that's the case, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5808 carries on second and third.
Okay, item 24. We'll open this public hearing to consider a request from Elkhorn Valley Community Development Corporation, doing business as NeighborWorks Northeast Nebraska, for a zoning change from C1 Local Business District to R3 Multiple Family Residential District on property located at the northeast corner of Phillip Avenue and 5th Street. To give us some background and kick off the public hearing, we'll hear from Val Grimes, our city planner.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This before you tonight is a request from C1 to R3 so that an apartment building can go up behind the old Courtesy Ford building in their gravel parking lot behind to the south. You'll see in the agenda packet that we did have an opposition letter and people did come to speak at Planning Commission in opposition to this. Mainly, I believe it went to parking and maybe future expansion of the church. It was the pastor of the church to the east that submitted the opposition letter. I don't know if they are here tonight at all, but we said that that would be part of the record for city council also. And I believe the applicant is here also if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Val. Any questions? Would invite the applicant to come forward and talk a little bit about the plans if so inclined.
With NeighborWorks Northeast Nebraska, versus South Street, Norfolk, Nebraska. This project is being completed in conjunction with the Growing Together Career Scholar Program at Wayne State College. NeighborWorks joined the effort with Progressive Builders of Norfolk to construct the 29-unit
Thank you.
Kelby Herman, 1005 Darris Drive. I'm working with NeighborWorks Northeast Nebraska to construct a 30-unit apartment, potentially a 30-unit apartment building on that property. I did bring a visual aid, a conceptual drawing of what we're proposing. It would, again, be in conjunction with the Wayne State College Growing Together program. So we're asking for it to be rezoned to R3 so we can accommodate some more downtown housing. So the architect has done a good job of trying to blend the building into the neighboring structures in downtown and make it visually appealing with a patio area and parking to the south. So. Questions?
I do have a question. You said parking to the south. Are you talking parking on the lot itself? Or
Yes.
are you including street parking?
There would be sufficient parking on the lot, potentially 6 stalls short of meeting the building code, and we have an agreement with Midtown Health to utilize their parking lot just to the north
For those extra
for those
6?
additional stalls. So otherwise, everything else would be contained on the lot. We'll have some parking off the alley between the old Courtesy Ford building and the new potential apartment being built. So there'll be about 17 stalls to the north off the alley, and then the rest of it will be to the south off of between the building and Phillip, and then we'll enter off. The driveway will come in on 5th.
Will you have 2 entrances to the property?
Just one.
Just one.
Currently, that's what's designed as one.
Was it 31 total units, Kelby?
30.
30, okay. And are all of these intended to accommodate Wayne State student housing, or is there a mix of some
It would, the
marketing?
majority of them would be for student housing, up to 45, potential 45 bedrooms for student housing, and then the remaining units, which would be up to 15 potential bedrooms, or 7 units would be for market rate. We've also discussed with Midtown Health, they do some internships with medical professionals, and they're interested in having a relationship where we can have some units close to their facility and more convenient for their people coming in. So,
Sure.
so it's a good partnership between Wayne State, Midtown Health, and ourselves to try to develop that parcel. Originally, Midtown bought the entire Courtesy Ford property and came to NeighborWorks, and then we put a partnership together to develop that into downtown housing.
What's your projected timeline then to meet the student housing?
We
need?
would start plans. We've started it on preliminary plans. I would like to be moving dirt first thing in the spring, and it needs to be, phase 1 would be completed fall of 24. So there would be potentially, if we reach an agreement with the college, students moving in fall of 24 and fall of 25.
Okay.
The pastor with the Methodist Church did come to the Planning Commission meeting, and he did have some objection. Basically, he would have liked to seen that lot become available to his church for future development in addition to his church. After the meeting, he did reach out and voiced his support to the project, and welcomed students or residents to the church or use their meeting rooms or whatnot once that project is done. He was mainly more concerned with an opportunity to expand in the future, and saw that lot as a good opportunity for him.
Good to know. Any other questions? It's a nice addition, looks like, to our downtown housing stock, which seems to be more and more in demand, as documented by some of the housing studies we've done
Yes.
recently. So
We're a
thank you for your investment in Norfolk.
exciting project downtown. So.
This is a public hearing, so anyone else who wishes to comment can do so. Okay, seeing and hearing no one, I will close off the discussion. Ask for Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 8th, 2022 at the request of Elkhorn Valley Community Development Corporation, DBA NeighborWorks Northeast Nebraska, to consider a zoning change from C1 Local Business District to R3 Multiple Family Residential District on property located at the northeast corner of Phillip Avenue and 5th Street. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request with a 6-0 vote.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. With that, I will close the hearing and move to item 25 and look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5809, approving a zoning change from C1 to R3 on property located at the northeast corner of Phillip Avenue and 5th Street.
I'll offer for consideration ordinance number 5809, approving a zoning change from C1 to R3 on property located in the northeast corner of Phillip Avenue and 5th Street.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion, council? Okay, hearing none, please vote. Or short title, I'm sorry.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5809 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would recommend that we suspend the rules on ordinance 5809 on second and third reading. Was not seeing any opposition on this.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. No further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5809 carries on second and third.
All right, that takes us to our regular agenda and item 26. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5810 to amend sections 25-1, 25-2, 25-3, and 25-9 of the official city code to prohibit the removal of city corridor trees funded and or planted by the city without prior written approval from the city, and to allow planting a tree closer than 5 feet to the back of curb on certain residential streets.
I will offer for consideration ordinance number 5810 to amend sections 25-1, 25-2, 25-3, and 25-9 of the official city code.
Second.
Okay, motion second, and to hear some background on this, we'll hear from Nate Powell, our Parks and Recreation Director.
Mayor, Council, thank you again. I guess the way to start this is the purpose of the changes that we've brought forward for the ordinance changes for the tree requirements in the terrace is to remove barriers for planting in the terrace to allow people to plant trees in that area where they used to be able to plant. You see a lot of older trees that are right there in the terrace, but we don't see too many younger trees, except for in a few communities it's become a demand to put trees back in the terrace there. So we looked at it a couple of times. We've looked at the concerns from the council and subcommittee, and we thought the barrier was the permit process. So we've removed that from the language here. We've consolidated that language into two sections, and one of those is 25-1D. This is about the removal process to make sure that people don't remove trees in the terrace that we've planted or funded as part of a city project. So we've listed out the corridor there in section E, and we've also defined that area as trees that will be maintained by the city. So if if we go in and we plant trees, we're gonna maintain those trees in those corridors. And we're gonna put those in the city ordinance if we add new areas like we have from First Street now on Benjamin Avenue all the way to 25th Street with all the new construction. So we have anticipated the new trees in that corridor, and the city will maintain those trees. You also will not be able to remove those trees without permission from the city. So you'd have to go through a process to request a removal of those trees. The second section is 25.3.3. Originally, it says you cannot plant a tree within 5 feet of the back of the curb. We've added except in residential streets with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less, or approval of the city engineer. So either of those would suffice for planting a tree in the corridor. We also have an education process that we'll have to go through to get it on our website, to get the information out there. We're going to have a re-tree program. This is where you get reimbursed up to $100 to plant a tree in your terrace. You would have to call us and go through a little bit of a process there to get permission. We can show you where you can plant them and kind of go through that process. So we kind of already have that in there. It doesn't need to be a permit because we feel most people want to be reimbursed for their tree if they want to plant theirs. So we've addressed those issues. I don't really have anything else, so staff recommends approval of the new updates based on your input.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. Just to recap a little bit, because we've had some discussion over this over the last few weeks, and I think this is a good example of staff listening to some council member concerns, reviewing and revising the policy as such. So the main components of this ordinance include removing the prohibition that exists today from planting within 5 feet back of curb on the terrace, correct?
That is correct.
Also, the permitting part of this that had a lot of discussion earlier, there will be no permit application for removing existing trees not planted by the city identified in those corridors,
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah.
Just for public record, can you list off those corridors that have been identified within the ordinance?
The corridors that have been identified is Benjamin Avenue from 1st Street to 25th Street, Brosh Avenue from 1st Street to 7th Street, Norfolk Avenue from Cottonwood Street to 8th Street, 2nd Street from Brosh Avenue to Madison Avenue, 3rd Street from Brosh Avenue to Madison Avenue, 4th Street from Brosh Avenue to Madison Avenue, 5th Street from from Prospect Avenue to Madison Avenue, and 7th Street on the east side from Brosh Avenue to Michigan.
Thank you, Nate.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, to help incentivize and assist people who do want to plant these trees, under the work of our arborists and tree division within Parks and Rec, we have adopted this re-tree grant program, correct? Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit more about that, Nate, and what that does?
We have budgeted up to $5,000 for up to 50 trees, $100 reimbursement if someone wants to plant within 10 feet of the curb would be a good requirement. That's pretty much the whole terrace section. And they could just call the Parks and Recreation Department, and we would send out the arborist, and they would, approve the location, approve the tree species, and we would reimburse up to $100 for purchase of a tree.
Okay. Thank you.
Nate, if the purchase of that tree is not $100, then do we only reimburse what the cost of the tree was? If it was a $75 tree?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate staff's work on this, reviewing and revising the policy. Any other questions or discussion?
I got one more question, Nate. So if that tree dies within a year after they've received the $100 grant, and they decide not to replant that tree after a year, is that get it deposited, do they have to pay that $100 back?
They do not. No.
And Nate, these grant programs, we're working in partnership, and I'm not sure specifically on this one, but we are working with groups like the local NRD, statewide Arboretum, Nebraska Forestry Service to provide some of the funds available to make these incentives, right?
Yep. Ideally, we would apply for grants each year to fund these projects. Yep.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thank you, Nate.
Mhm.
Any other questions or discussion, council? Okay. Hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend sections 25-1, 25-2, 25-3, and 25-9 of the official city code to prohibit the removal of city corridor trees funded and/or planted by the city without prior written approval from the city, to allow planting a tree closer than 5 feet to the back of a curb on certain residential streets, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Arns, Merrill, McCarthy, Murin, Jackson. Voting in opposition, Hildebrand. Ordinance number 5810 carries on first reading.
Okay, takes us to item number 27. Would look for a motion to consider approval to purchase a Bobcat T66 T4 track loader and skid steer from Bobcat of Norfolk with the Nebraska state contract discount for the amount of $61,687.61 for use by the Parks Division.
So move. I'll make the motion. Second.
Motion second. Background on this, Nate Powell.
Mayor, council, yes, we're looking at purchasing a Bobcat skid steer. This is so we can do some of our own projects, like playground installation, ball field maintenance, snow removal, landscaping projects, forestry projects such as planting and stump removal. It just would give our staff the tools they need to work on these projects in-house and be a little more efficient. So staff recommends purchasing the Bobcat skid steer from Bobcat of Norfolk using the state bid contract price for $61,687.61.
Okay, thank you, Nate. Any questions?
Nate, I got a
Yeah.
question. Is this a replacement or is this a new skid steer?
This would be a new skid steer. We do not have a skid steer for the Parks and Rec Department.
Okay, with this new skid steer, how many hours of use is going to be anticipated on this machine in a year's time?
I have not done the math on that question. I don't think I can answer that right here.
Okay. So we don't know how much we're going to use this, but we're asking for $61,687, but we don't know how much use it'll positively get.
It'll be used pretty much daily. We have some major projects that we want to be able to do in-house, from irrigation to playground installations. We've got several this next year. I anticipate this piece of equipment being used on a daily basis.
And this is going to be used throughout the Parks Department, or is this going to be only used for one crew?
Nope, the entire department. I can't say if it's an hour a day or 2 hours or 4 hours. Some days it'll be full
Okay,
days.
let's
Yeah.
go to usage of the year. We're talking 500 hours, 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours.
I would say probably in the 500 to 700 hour range a year.
Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, I do. Is, like, say, the street department, I'm assuming they probably have, or the city probably has some other Bobcat equipment, skid loaders. I mean, I see you have a
Yep.
bucket on here,
Yep.
but any other attachments that you think you would be needing in addition to just the bucket? And if the other departments have something similar to share?
We have other attachments for a toolcat that we have that can be used on the skid steer as well.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
So we don't need the attachments.
You
We've
don't need
got-
any
yeah.
additional other?
Yeah.
In the past, how did you get these projects done?
It's my understanding, we haven't installed a lot of playgrounds ourselves or done a lot of these projects. We did an irrigation project this year, and we've got about 3 playground projects lined up now.
And this would save us some time or money in some way?
Yep, you can figure, for a playground, you would double the cost for the installation. So if it's a $100,000 project, you're probably looking at $200,000 if they install it. So we'll save the money on this toolcat in the first playground project.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Good point.
Say 61,000 in labor in one project, the playground equipment?
They say 1.25 or so is about what it is if they have it installed.
Any further discussion or questions, council? Hearing none, please vote. Oh. I've already called for the vote. I would have, I've asked for a vote procedurally. Jim? No, go ahead. Come on.
Jim McKenzie, 1412 Longhorn Drive. It's my understanding that the street division already has 2 skid steers right now. It's also my understanding they only put on about 100 to 200 hours on the meter each year on each one. So with the total number of working hours in a year being 2,080, means those skid steers that we currently have are used 5 to 10% of a 40-hour work week. They're sitting idle 90 to 95% of the time. The Parks Department's always borrowed a skid steer from the street division in the past, or just had someone from the street division come help them with a skid steer when they needed it. It makes absolutely no sense for the Parks Department to go out and spend $62,000 to buy their own skid steer when the city already has 2 of them that are hardly used. There is no for-profit business in the world that I know of that's going to go out and buy a brand new skid steer when they already got 2 of them sitting in the garage most of the time. How many times has the Park Division had to rent a skid steer in the past 2 to 5 years because one was not available to borrow from the street division? 0, I would assume. And if you did have to rent one, if they're both in use, you can rent one for $350, $400 a day. It's way less than a $62,000 capital expenditure that also requires ongoing maintenance and an internal storage location. I believe the money would be much better spent towards the police expansion. If you figure that you would have to borrow $62,000 less on a police station project, you save $3,100 a year just in interest at 5%. So in essence, a skid steer expenditure also costs $3,100 per year in interest, because that $62,000 could be used to offset borrowing for more important projects. Most of the citizens of Norfolk have to prioritize their spending every day. They don't have an unlimited budget. It's time for the city to prioritize its spending on its most pressing projects. The city does not have an unlimited budget either. Every expenditure should be reviewed closely. I urge the council to reject this expenditure, or at least table it to determine why the Parks Division cannot just continue to use one of the existing skid steers. And if they say they're going to start doing parks projects, why don't they just do those with the existing skid steers we have? Let's try it for a while before we go out and spend $62,000 on a brand new one. And there's also OSHA training required to be a skid steer operator. I would think it would make more sense to have our existing street division staff who are familiar with those continue to help when necessary. Again, I urge you to prioritize your spending, reject this, and put that money toward more pressing projects like the police division expansion.
Jim, you had mentioned that it's your understanding that these particular pieces of equipment we have right now are only being used 10 or 15% of the time?
That's correct.
And how did you obtain that understanding?
That's just my understanding from talking to some other people.
And who are those other people? Were they coffee shop people?
It's not important in this particular
Well, I think
discussion.
it is important, Jim,
Well,
if you're
we have-
going,
we have a
excuse
person
me,
here who can just-
excuse me,
We have it here. who can
excuse me.
The council member's
answer that
trying to
question.
speak.
I think it is important when you're telling us facts that we're supposed to believe, and we're supposed to, I think it would be important for you to tell us where those facts were obtained.
It's not important. You've got your street director right here who can
How do
tell
we know
you
you're
how
not
many
making
hours
those
I
up,
put on
Jim?
that.
If it's not important, how do we know where those facts are coming from?
Why don't you ask your street director here?
Well,
Why-
I'm
why are
asking
so
you because you're saying that you have the facts.
Why are you
Where
co-
did you get the facts?
Why are you so concerned about that?
Because you said you had the understanding. Where'd you get the understanding?
Why are you so concerned about that?
Why don't you answer my question first?
Well, you got your street supervisor right here who can tell you exactly what it is.
We have our parks guy here too, but I'm not going to ask him. I'm going to ask you because you're the gentleman who walked up and said you have the information.
That's
On record,
my
on public
understanding.
record.
It's my understanding.
Okay. I'll take it that those facts could have come from anywhere.
Anywhere, absolutely.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
I would invite Parks and Rec Director or Public Works Director to comment about the process of where we got here. When the public sees that equipment purchases like this come to the council, there is typically a process that leads up to that, and that includes a months-long budgeting process for expenditures. So I'd invite staff to provide any background on how we got to the request for this particular piece of equipment.
For this particular piece of equipment, we go through a process of, talking with our staff about the needs. Being that I've been new this year, I've been able to have a lot of those conversations on what their needs are, what are their barriers to doing the work that would usually be expected of a Parks and Rec department. And one of those is the availability of equipment. If somebody else is using it, you can't use it. Like if it's snowing, for instance, you've got to be able to have that equipment that day. You can't ask, somebody else is using it on another project or using it for snow themselves, then we don't have a skid steer. If we use a project for a project that might take us 2 months where we're using a skid steer, we're going to be using that skid steer during that entire project, and it's going to be used, and we won't be able to give it back each day if we're in need of it. So I'm just trying to remove some barriers to have equipment available to our staff so they can do their jobs as expected.
To perform their jobs more efficiently.
That's correct.
And completely.
Yes. It's not efficient for people to stand around and not have equipment available to them, because there is a wage that we do pay for the staff, and we want to make sure we have what the tools that they need to do their job on a day-to-day basis.
And so Nate, for installing playground equipment, historically in the city of Norfolk, Parks and Recreation has not done that on its own because it's not been able to, correct? It's not had the right resources and equipment like this to do so?
They have not had the right training or equipment. That's correct.
Okay.
We've
So
given
an
them-
example is like
Yep.
with the Skyview Park playground upgrades that were made within the last 2 years. That was all contracted out, as I
That's correct.
as I recall.
Yes,
Be-
yes.
Otherwise, some of that could have been done by Norfolk
That is
Park
correct.
staff. Any other questions? Yeah.
Mayor and council, I'd just point out that as a function of the annexation and just as we're retooling our street department, we are substantially increasing our efforts on street repairs and street improvements. This year, we doubled the amount of concrete repair that we do in-house, and we would expect to continue to increase that amount. And so, we are certainly using the equipment that we have much, much more. We do look at and discuss equipment use, as we're we're expanding and doing more work, and whether or not we are even ourselves within the street department needing to rent more equipment or purchase more equipment. But I would say our ability to share, we certainly do have those conversations in-house with the Parks Department and other departments as there is need. But certainly, and Will is here, and Will could speak too if desired, but we are using our equipment much more in the street department.
And I would like to add, we've also added miles of bike trail as well that we are having to maintain with our current staff level.
Mayor and Council, I'll add one more, just kind of a broad overall view of how our Parks Department has been changing over the last year or so. It's turned from just kind of a maintaining reactive department to a proactive department. I don't know, Nate, I kind of glossed over it a little bit, but I think it's important to note too that we do have on staff today a trained certified playground safety inspector. So we did put one of our staff to do that, who will oversee these installations. So I think too, these are new things that our Parks Division is doing. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, that we're trying to be efficient, trying to complete more for the taxpayer dollar than we have in the past.
Fair points. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Arns, Merrill, McCarthy, Murin, Jackson. Voting in opposition, Hildebrand. Motion carries.
Item 28, we look for a motion to consider approval of change order number 2F and certificate of substantial completion with Elkhorn Paving Company for the U.S. Highway 275 undercrossing RTP 2017-001 project, resulting in a net increase of $7,250.87.
Consideration of approval of change order 2F.
Second.
Motion and a second, and for some background on this, Steve Ramus, please.
Mayor, for these next two, I'll ask that Anna Allen, our Assistant City Engineer, present those.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This project is the Highway 275 undercrossing that is right next to Victory Road. It connects with the existing trail, and then it continues that trail along underneath the Highway 275, underneath that bridge, and connects back into Victory Road on the south. So provides access for bikers and walkers and joggers to get under the highway safely. This project was awarded in 2021, and it was completed in October of this year. This change order is for the increase of $7,250.87, making the total construction cost of $356,755.18. The change order is for an increase in replacement and removal and replacement of riprap material, some changes in the retaining wall, not needing as many linear feet of retaining wall as originally planned, and also an increase in erosion control mat along the project.
Okay.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for him? Okay, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Item 29, we look for a motion to consider approval of change order number 1F with Bauer Underground Incorporated for the Benjamin Avenue overhead to underground utility relocation project, resulting in a net decrease of $8,940.50.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion second. And Anna, once again.
Thank you. This project is for the undergrounding portion of the Benjamin Avenue project of burying the conduit for the underground electrical needed to, for the construction of the roadway along Benjamin Avenue. There was a lot of aerial electrical along that corridor that needed to be buried. So this is a change order for some changes in the cost of the underground utility relocation. And this is also the final change order and final pay app for this project. Changes for this were, there was 2 locations. They needed to do some additional underground work to connect some streetlights. And then there was the removal, taking the retaining wall portion of the contract out of Bauer's contract, and it would be now on the Benjamin Avenue contractor. So that is that decrease of $8,940.50, and that's a total contract cost of $789,963.60.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have one. So the 8,900 was a portion that's taken out because they're not doing the retaining wall.
Correct. So the way this was broken up for the Bauer Underground contract, there's a retaining wall on the northeast corner of Riverside and Benjamin that I think there might have been a retaining wall there already. So the removal of that retaining wall and then to rebuild a retaining wall around some of the transformer structures that were put in. Part of it was under this Bauer Underground contract, but the other half of it was under the contract for the street improvements along Benjamin Avenue. So instead of having one contractor do half of a retaining wall and another contractor do the other half of the retaining wall, we removed it from the Bauer Underground contract, and now it is going to be on the BX Civil contract.
So it's fair to say we'll get a change order for $8,900.
The increase, well, it wouldn't be 89. This $8,940 was
A combination.
It was a combination. So it was an addition of some extra conduit to be buried, and then the subtraction of the
Yeah, it does look like
retaining wall.
maybe 3,300 was the retaining wall portion of it.
I believe that the retaining wall. The
Well,
retaining wall
I'm looking at
was,
what they're taking off there.
yeah,
Out of that 89.
16,000 will be added to BX Civil's contract then?
correct. That would be the material cost for that retaining wall. When Bauer went in there, they did do the removal of the, what was there already, and they did some dirt work for the placement of the power pedestals and transformers over there. So they did have some labor towards that, but the material cost for that retaining wall would be, that's $16,000. So that will be taken out, and that would be added to the BX Civil contract.
Okay, hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 30 would look for a motion to consider approval of an agreement for engineering, consulting, and related services for 60% design and pre-permitting of proposed improvements with HDR Engineering Incorporated for the levee certification, Phase 3A project for an amount not to exceed $509,480.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Motion and second, and Steve Ramus, Public Works Director. for
Mayor and
background on this,
council,
please.
we have completed the alternatives analysis portion of the levy recertification. And so what's in front of you here is Phase 3A of the design services portion of the contract. Phase 3B would be presented about 9 months from now, which would be the permitting side. This contract is about $509,480 for this portion. The Total estimated cost of the project is just a little over $7,145,000 between final design and estimated construction costs, and as well as construction engineering. We've probably been working on this now for about 7 years. It was delayed during the 2019 flood and was further delayed as a function of the 2020 COVID issue, and is also probably what was driving the timing of this a little bit was the actual remapping that's currently in place at FEMA. That remapping project has also been delayed as a function of funding in general and COVID and other floods during that 2019 timeframe. So FEMA as well is delayed. What is driving our need to recertify our levee is actually the remapping that FEMA is doing. And so, if you've been just kind of tracking this along the way since about 2015, 16, as we entered phase 1, and wondering why we seem to be dragging this out for several years, it's our need to have it in place is a little bit delayed, but then also we're just kind of tracking along with the flood and COVID and everything else. We did present the alternatives analysis here about 4 months ago to, actually I think it was a work session, if I recall correctly, where there was a presentation on that. Subsequent to that work session, HDR did spend some more time doing some analysis on the seepage portion of the recertification, which is up in that golf course area. And came back with some alternatives for a sand layer or sand seal that would allow us to kind of put an exterior berm on the north side of the golf course and yet allow some of that drainage along the north end of that golf course is desirable for the golfers in terms of a water feature. And so that is certainly the approach that is the primary approach for design purposes. There will need to be some wetland study, jurisdictional determination done as a part of this that would ultimately determine the final design in that area. Staff as well as HDR did meet with the golf course and kind of walk through that, and Anna can talk to that. She was there, but the golf course is on board with the design intent. So I think with that, I would answer other questions around where we are with the levee recertification and any questions you might have.
Stephen, you mentioned earlier that FEMA is driving this.
Correct.
Is it safe to assume they're not buying any of the gas?
Yeah, they're not buying any of the gas.
I didn't think so. Thank you.
This, at least for as long as I've been here, this has been a bonded capital improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I appreciate the background. I've got asked about the levee quite a bit, honestly, and I know we started this a ways back, and back then it was, let's try and get it done ahead of time before we're forced to do it or behind doing it, knowing that it takes a long time with the Corps of Engineers and FEMA. So it looks like we're about halfway done. We're on 3A of 5 phases.
Yeah.
Not necessarily halfway, depending on how much construction you got to do, but.
Correct. So I would anticipate that we would move through the design process over the next 9 months, and then go into the permitting phase of the project, which with the Corps of Engineers could certainly take anywhere from 12 to 18 months, depending on their funding sources and other projects they have. I don't know, Val, do you know where we are in terms of potentially, I think we're talking 25, 26 to have the mapping potentially done, again, that based on funding on their end of things. So, but if we're constructing this, that would put us construction 24, 25, certainly ahead of what we see as the mapping. But Val may have some update on mapping.
Yeah, I would agree that if we're on that kind of schedule with the levy, we would hopefully be done with the levy by the time they're really getting back into the mapping process again. They've put it on hold for probably 3 to 4 years. FEMA, from my understanding, didn't want DNR and FEMA having a grant hanging out there for that long because they need to redo the LIDAR after the 2019 flood because the stream shifted in places, and so they needed to pretty much start over again. The North Fork of the Elkhorn watershed, because we actually have 2 watersheds coming in, the Upper Elkhorn and the North Fork, and they pretty much meet at Norfolk. So the DNR thinks that it's best practice to put both of them on hold, even though the North Fork was farther along than the Upper Elkhorn, just so that they can have the best mapping available. So when they get into Upper Elkhorn, it wouldn't be kind of an oops that something should have maybe been done with the North Fork at the same time. So we do have a few years, it sounds like. If they can get to it earlier, they will ask for it, but I think they're having a bit of staffing problems too, just at the DNR.
And on top of that, we can't really touch it without Corps of Engineer FEMA approval. Am I thinking correctly? Or just Corps approval?
Correct.
And one more question that has come up. There is no grants or funding to take care of this. This is on us to make the fix, even though they installed it. Right?
As the levy sponsor, it's on us.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's safe to assume the levy's okay if we have another event like we had in the past, where it was full front to brim.
Yes, I would say it's safe to say that
Wouldn't be right on the fee, right?
the levee's in good shape. You know, certainly the event we had in 2019 tested it. You know, we did not see any boiling as a function of that. It held up very well. There was no overtopping. Had there been overtopping, we probably would have saw some erosion where that was occurring. If that does occur, it's most likely going to occur on the very southern end of the levee. Probably south of 275 somewhere. But yeah, it functioned extremely well.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 31, look for a motion to consider approval of an agreement for professional engineering services with JEO Consulting Group Incorporated for the 2023 bridge inspections for a total of $7,000.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Motion second. For some background on this, Steve Ramus, please.
Mayor and council, we have many bridges here within the city. 19 of them are due for their inspections, and so this $7,000 would complete the inspection of 19 different bridges here within the community. Generally, these come around about every, it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 years. It just depends on the bridge and the condition of the bridge. But this is certainly the largest number we've had in any one given year come due. JEO has done these for us for many, many years.
Are they the ones who keep track of which ones need it and how often?
That is kept track of by the DOT. DOT has a database of bridges across the state, and so all of our bridges are part of that database. And we get a mailing from the DOT for those bridges telling us that those are coming due.
And just for clarification, this is just within the city limits, correct?
That is correct.
Our extraterritorial jurisdiction be more county related?
Correct. Yeah, this is just inside city limits.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
What is the timeline of completion? Once it is
Oh, these would probably take, once they start, these would probably take them 19 bridges. A lot of these are smaller structures. You could probably do 2 or 3 of these a day.
So by the time we
So-
get to compile data,
I would say March.
okay, thank you.
Anything further? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 32 would look for a motion to consider approval of ordinance number 5811, annexing a tract of land generally located southeast of the intersection of East Benjamin Avenue and North Victory Road.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5811.
Motion and second. Steve, once again, some background on this, please.
Mayor and council, about 6 weeks, I'd say 6 to 8 weeks ago, we were contacted by the church requesting annexation. The conversation was partially driven by water. They were desiring to lower their water bill and asked what they might be able to do. We suggested that if they requested annexation, that would reduce their water bill by 50%. They said that sounds really good. We're consider ourselves to be a partner of the community. And when they were here for planning commission, the owner was present, but I see they're not here today. But they said they're very pleased to be considered a part of the community, and just aside from the fact that their water bill would go down, they felt this would make them more a part of the city of Norfolk, and so they were happy to present this voluntary annexation.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, please vote. Or short title, sorry.
An ordinance of the city of Norfolk, Nebraska to annex to said city the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter of section 24, township 24 north, range 1 west of the 6th PM, Madison County, Nebraska, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith, and to provide that this ordinance shall be published in pamphlet form.
Now, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5811 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, seeing no.
No.
We can't. Oh, it's an annexation. Yeah, excuse me. Thank you.
Item 33 would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5812 to amend section 24-164 to restrict parking on the east side of North Cottonwood Street from East Norfolk Avenue to East Prospect Avenue, and on the south side of East Prospect Avenue from North First Street to North Cottonwood Street.
I'll make an offer for consideration of ordinance number 5812.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Here's some background on this. Chief Don Miller of the Norfolk Police Division.
Mayor and council, the ordinance in front of you is a result of the First Street closure in the 200 block of North First Street. While we have a designated detour route up Riverside Boulevard, we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of local traffic increased on North Cottonwood and East Prospect. So what I'm proposing is putting no parking along one side of the street. Currently it's allowed on both sides. We did something very similar when we had the East Norfolk Avenue bridge closure because of that increased traffic. With traffic parked on both sides, those are relatively narrow streets and it creates some safety concerns. And so that's the whole idea behind restricting it. Now, we're restricting it on the south side on Prospect. The park is there, and with all the activity there, I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of construction equipment, vehicles moving in and out, so that with no parking there, not only can traffic get through, emergency vehicles can get through. Any activity at Johnson's Park won't have to worry about working around the park vehicles on the south side. As far as North Cottonwood, it was a toss-up whether we went with the east or the west side. It really didn't make a whole lot of difference. So we just picked one side, just to eliminate so that cars can pass through that area, north and south. And then item 34 is also directly related to this.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions?
This is just temporary, Chief.
Yes, the plan would be temporary like we did last time. When their roadway is opened up, we would bring the parking back to their to the previous condition, like we did last time.
I do have a question, kind of more for the streets. So emergency snow, you have to park on one side of the street or the other.
Emergency, they usually go even. If it's restricted on one side, then it stays, you don't have to do anything different. If it's
Okay.
no parking restrictions on one side, it just stays that way.
Mayor and council, I was contacted. There are 2 daycare centers over there, and I believe there might be some representation here this evening from those. I don't have a good solution for that. There is a need there for some very short time drop off as people are dropping off infants into daycare. That was the call and the concern, having mothers travel a block or a block and a half with an infant for a drop off. So I don't have a really good solution for that. I think, as Captain Miller, or Chief Miller, sorry, mentioned, this was done as part of another project here about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Somehow we managed to get through it, so I'm sure we'll get through this one as well. But I certainly agree with the need. The street department agrees with the need. I understand the concern.
Then in addition, well, I'll save it for 34.
With that topic, was there discussion if they're both on the same side of the street and we could flip which side is no parking? Did that matter in that discussion? If it didn't matter which side of the street we put as no parking,
The
how it might affect
Cottonwood
that?
really didn't matter.
Okay.
Prospect, we discussed it and felt the south side was a lot more appropriate to restrict it on the south side because Johnson Park is there. People could park closer to the residences, and with the activity at Johnson's Park would be better to restrict on the south side on Prospect. On North Cottonwood, I didn't think it made a whole lot of difference one way or the other.
Any other questions or comments or discussion? Okay, hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 24-164 of the official city code to restrict parking on the east side of Cottonwood Street from Norfolk Avenue to Prospect Avenue, and on the south side of Prospect Avenue from First Street to Cottonwood Street to coincide with road and bridge reconstruction on North First Street, provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5812 carries on first reading.
I would, in light of the safety issues here, I would ask to suspend the rules and waive readings 2 and 3.
Second that.
Motion to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. No further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5812 carries on second and third.
And item 34, would look for motion to consider resolution 2022-58, adding stop signs to control the following locations: east and westbound traffic at the intersection of North Cottonwood and East Nebraska Avenue, westbound traffic at the intersection of North Cottonwood Street and East Prosh Avenue.
I'll offer for consideration of resolution 2022-58.
Second that.
Motion and second. For further background on this, Chief Don Miller, once again.
Mayor and council, the justification, the reasoning is the same on this item as it was in the previous one. Adding a couple of stop signs gives that area the right-of-way going through for north and south traffic. We have been evaluating the intersection of North Cottonwood and East Prospect. We anticipate as the activities at Johnson's Park continue, there will be some closures on Prospect, so that traffic will end up getting routed. Not that we're routing it, but it will naturally go up to East Klug. So we're monitoring that intersection. We're not asking for stop signs at that intersection at this time, but that could be something down the road as that traffic gets adjusted with the construction going on in that area. So this resolution is to add those stop signs. As the other item, would be a temporary addition to once the construction is done, and then we would return that area back to its previous condition.
Okay,
One
thank
more
you.
thought I had on this whole thing is, I went to Jefferson, all my kids went to Jefferson. It's congested all the time down there.
Absolutely.
All the time, even before this construction. I couldn't imagine what it's like. It's gotta be almost horrible. But are we monitoring that as school's going on?
Yes, I mean, we monitor the schools all the time anyway, and then in light of the construction, we're putting extra attention on those traffic areas to monitor for congestion, see what could be, if there's something we can do to help. This is gonna be a challenge, and no matter how we try to do it, especially once Prospect has a temporary closure and they're on East Clue, because traffic's gonna go past the high school, or the grade school. It's a safety concern. It would be nice if that's not where they went, but the reality is that that's where traffic is gonna flow.
Right. I'm just thinking out of an easier street coming on earlier. Box Elder's wider, larger, more of an artillery street to go back in there. And, if they needed to go back up First Street, pick a different route rather than trying to go by that school. But it seems it's always congested.
Right. I'm hoping as the community, because we have the designated detours, but as the local residents, as they go through that area, when they see that congestion, I'm hoping that many of them will find an alternative route and not go through there. But we can't control what they may choose to do. It's going to be a challenge, and we'll be monitoring it like we did last time. We'll have regular patrol activities in those areas because we know that there's going to be some challenges.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Resolution 2022-58 is adopted.
That concludes this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. We are adjourned.